Unfortunately, some seniors who received COVID supports have seen their GIS benefits affected. Our government, very much including me personally, is very aware of this issue and is actively seeking a solution. We know that many seniors rely on GIS payments to help make ends meet, and I am confident that the government will have more to say on this issue in the next few days.
That's Chrystia Freeland addressing one of the conditions raised by other parties over the government's Bill C2, which would extend pandemic aid. It might be a signal, I think it is a signal from the finance minister today about what could come in next week's fiscal update on Tuesday. What should we be watching for? It's Thursday. I'm here with the At Issue panel, Chantal Hebert, Andrew Coyne, and Althia Raj. I'm going to start with you this week, Chantal. Obviously, this is one of the demands made by specifically the Bloc, this correction, but I wonder if it's any indication about how expansive or not this fiscal update will be on Tuesday.
I'm not sure. I think the fiscal update sounds more like a placeholder until the budget than anything else. And I think what we just heard is reassurance that the Bloc will get what it has been asking for to support Bill C2. But I do think the government's priority, notwithstanding the fiscal update, is to get the post-pandemic relief programs, whatever you call them, through before the end of next week and to the Senate in time for Christmas.
It was described to me today as a skinny update, Andrew. So I don't know if that means that this will be a short panel, but that's what it was described to me today.
Well, I mean, this is a skinny parliament, if you will. I mean, they've left it so long before they recalled parliament. They've left themselves very few days before parliament rises for the Christmas recess. So yeah, every indication we're getting is that this will not be a terribly exciting fiscal update. I think it's still an opportunity. There's always an opportunity for the government to signal that it gets it on a couple of issues. In the short term, that it gets that we have an inflation issue, a wildfire breaking out that we need to put out. That while that's primarily the Bank of Canada's responsibility, the government can buttress its credibility if it shows that it's going to get control of its finances, because otherwise people start to wonder at one point, does the bank have to bail them out again? And longer term, it has to show that it gets that we have a growth crisis in this country. We're now projecting real annual growth rates of 1.6%. That's about a third of what it was 30 years ago, and just not remotely enough to finance the kinds of social programs that we would like to finance as the population ages. That's particularly a concern for the provinces. So it ought to be a priority, though we've seen precious little evidence of it through the 6 years of this government's life, that it puts a priority on growth rather than simply redistributing amongst the existing players with the existing growth rates. So there's an opportunity. I don't think they'll take it to signal that in the fiscal update. It'll be more damning if they don't do so in the next budget.
Althia, what are you being told? What are you looking for?
Same, basically, not to be too excited about next Tuesday. In some ways, it's a table setting for the budget coming in the spring, but it's basically an update on the numbers. I think there's going to be some language around inflation that we saw in the throne speech. There was one mention where the government said, and our solution is our childcare plan and housing. And I think that there is an interest to show that the government is hearing what people are saying, and that they are aware of the situation and they have an answer to it. This is not going to be a momentous occasion. Are we going to have a special? I don't know. I don't think so.
We're going to have a special, but we're not even inviting you.
There you go. So it can't be that important.
Yeah, well, just for the record, let's remember that a non-story fiscal update precipitated the parliamentary crisis in 2008. I don't think we're there, but
No.
that is
But that was the lesson. No, like
Yes.
that was the lesson, to your point, that the government needs to be responsive. And the fact that it wasn't responsive, the opposition parties banded together and tried to basically take over. I don't think we're going to set.
No,
I'd
be shocked.
I don't think we're not there.
Yeah,
But in
yeah.
defense of fiscal updates,
I should
go
say,
ahead,
I think
Andrew,
far the more important economic decision coming up is the renewal of the Bank of Canada's mandate.
Agreed.
We're getting some word that there's going to be some slight tweaking of the existing mandate. That's semi-reassuring. But at a time when inflation is now poking near to 5%, one hopes that the signal will be sent in that decision, as in others, is that the government and the Governor of the Bank of Canada take this extremely seriously, and that they're not going to allow this to become entrenched and start feeding into higher and higher price increases in the years to come.
But do we have to see in the update, Chantal, to everyone's point, some indication from the government about the fact that it does realize that people's food prices are going up, because this is an issue where the Conservatives feel they are making some inroads, that this is working to some extent in terms of convincing Canadians the Liberals are not thinking about these things?
Well, if it's working outside of the parliamentary bubble, I'm still waiting for a poll to show it. I think the Liberals figure that all of this can wait for the budget in the spring, and in any event, they're not going to give you a break on the price of your turkey in the fiscal update.
I personally oppose Bill 21 and the measures in it, and I do think we have to make sure that everyone is respectful and respected in these discussions about secularism.
Simply because of the way she looked and the way she dressed, she is no longer able to teach those kids. That is everything that's wrong with this bill.
The Prime Minister was very clear during the election campaign, asked about C21 on many occasions. He was very clear about our government's position, and of course, that remains our government's position.
I'm not sure that that's the case, but we'll get everyone to weigh in. There's a renewed political reaction around the controversial secularism bill in Quebec, Bill 21. It comes after an elementary school teacher in the province was removed from the classroom for wearing a hijab. So what does this mean for the debate around the law? Could it move anything? Chantal, Andrew, Althia, all back for another round. We've had this conversation so many times. I think what's interesting here is a concrete example of how Bill 21 works. And then some interesting reaction, including from a handful of Conservative MPs, including Kyle Seaback, who said that it is a, quote, disgrace and that he can't keep silent. There were a bunch of other Conservative MPs who jumped on that too. What are we to make of this different or renewed reaction to Bill 21, Chantal?
For one, this is not going to get resolved in the House of Commons. It will be resolved in the courts, and at some point it will be resolved in the Supreme Court, and I can't predict what the outcome of that will be. Along the way, the federal government of the day will be asked whether to intervene, take part in the challenge. The Conservatives, and that is why Aaron O'Toole will probably find this a major headache, he has vouched publicly never, if he became Prime Minister, to associate himself with a challenge of a provincial law. Now, as far as I can tell, the Liberals, including MPs from Quebec, are pretty united in the notion that they oppose this bill and that they would support the federal government joining a court challenge at some point. I think that's also true mostly of the NDP. So the Conservatives have a problem because the MPs who most support Bill 21 outside of the Bloc Québécois sit in the Conservative caucus.
The reason I responded that way to Chrystia Freeland was because it took a while for the Prime Minister to say in the last election, okay, well, yes, we might consider a point where we would intervene. When do we get to that point, Andrew? Or when do we get to a point where people feel comfortable saying this doesn't work for us in this country and here's what we're going to do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the position was particularly clear. I'm not even sure it's a position. So for her to reassert that the position is clear and it's still the position, I think just simply added to the fog. But it's the closest thing we've got to any kind of statement from any of the federal leaders about what they would do about this. It has really been a display of quite disgraceful, to use that word, political and moral cowardice from our federal leadership on this. Yes, it will probably be resolved in the courts. But there's a climate of opinion outside the courts that's also important. It's about what we are as a country, what kinds of things we stand for or won't stand for as a country. This bill amounts to a kind of segregation, let's call it for what it is, certainly on religious grounds and not coincidentally on racial grounds, that if you are a member of an observant religious minority, you will not be hired for significant sections of public sector employment in Quebec. That is and should be intolerable. And people in positions of leadership ought to say so and not, prance around with, oh, we don't want to interfere with provincial matters, etc. You know, we like to compare ourselves quite often in this country favorably to the United States, but the United States quite long ago said, when it comes to this kind of discrimination and segregation, it's not going to be just a states' rights matter. That this goes to the heart of what is the American understanding and the American compact. I'm not sure why we are so afraid to say so in Canada.
Thea, your thoughts?
So I agreed with everything that was said. I don't think the issue, the law, will be resolved out in the public sphere. But I think what has happened today that is really noteworthy is that Conservative MPs have publicly come out to defend a position that is in opposition to their leader's position. So that tells you two things. One, it tells you that Erin O'Toole is quite weak. It also tells you that there are people who feel like this is an issue that is fundamental to them and that they have more chances of getting reelected by carving out an independent stance on this issue than on following their leader's advice. What struck me was not that Kyle Seaback came out publicly, although I found that surprising because MPs have told me that Mr. Seaback has been speaking about this issue in caucus. This is not the first time he's pronouncing his opinion on this, that in fact he believes that the Conservative Party should take out a strong position against Bill 21 and that this would be a perfect wedge against the Liberals. And frankly, I agree with them. What I thought was also surprising was that a bunch of Conservative MPs retweeted him. Yeah. And so I think that this is, this is something that we should be watching because there may be other consequences, not just on this bill. I mean, it is interesting that we did not see the same reaction on the Liberal or NDP benches, although Alexandra Mendez, who's a Liberal MP from Montreal, tweeted her opposition. There is the Liberal caucus is mostly the Quebec Liberal caucus mostly believes that they lost in 2019 their majority because of the government's position on Bill 21. And so the Liberals are kind of squeezed. The Conservatives, despite Erin O'Toole's previous statements, could change this dialogue if they choose to.
Chantal,
no, they couldn't. Not without having François Legault say, I'm sorry I ever told you to back these people. Not if they want to hang on to their Quebec caucus. There are Quebec MPs.
Hang on, Chantal.
Whoa. There are Quebec MPs who are out today saying, no, we are fully behind Quebec's right to do Bill 21. I actually believe that if it came to a Quebec caucus having to walk the talk of challenging Bill 21, the Liberal Quebec caucus is much more likely to do that than the Quebec Conservative Quebec caucus. Not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
agreed, but
yeah. Go ahead. Last word, Althia.
There's 10 seats in the Conservative 10 seats in Quebec. There are 56 seats in the GTA. I mean, that's the math.
Yes, but Erin O'Toole can't survive without losing the Social Conservatives, which he has, and then losing the Quebec caucus. There is very little left for him at that point.
Okay, well, that was way. There's a lot going on in our conversation. I think we'll come back to it because it's not the first time we've talked about it. Thank you all for your strong and forceful opinions. Appreciate it. Before we go, we want to remind you that we want to hear from you, from the pandemic response to the federal election. Hey, remember that? Everything in between. You can send us your political questions about 2021, what you want to know about what the next year could bring, and these smart people will answer it. Email us at thenational@cbc.ca. You can reach us on Instagram. And we'll put your questions to the At Issue panel in the coming weeks.